episode of Respawn. This is Volume 6, and I'm Colby.
I'm Derek.
And today we are going to have a weird conversation about Spawn, because Volume 6 is, out of the first, 10 volumes, one of the weirder ones for a few reasons.
I did not know that. I gotta say, this is the first volume of Spawn that I didn't like. I was disappointed in. There's some stuff to like about it, but overall, I walked away kind of disappointed. This is going to be my first, probably overly negative review on Respawn.
Well, it's interesting because, especially where we came from, Volume 5, we can, I think, both agree was if not the best, tied for the best overall volume out of the show so far.
And easily the one that sparked the most interesting discussion so far on the series.
Yes, it has so many interesting ideas. It's McFarlane really going out of his way to tackle some big topics. It's Capullo kind of coming into his own as an artist. And you have a lot of interesting moments. This one, I think I want to frame it as Volume 6, especially where Volume 5 ends off. Volume 6 is a big, rebuilding, revamping of, okay, we kind of finished off some major plot points. Now we got to introduce some new ones. We'll also introduce some new characters. We've killed off or moved other characters away from the book. So let's bring in some new blood. We always compare it to wrestling. This is very much that new blood era of WWE before the Attitude Era of this weird we're going to push Kevin Nash and Bret Hart to the moon. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Mabel's going to win King of the Ring. This interesting weird time of trying to build new stars and trying to come up with new stuff, and not all of it landing and not all of it being huge. I mean,
and I feel like one of the things that really kills me about this volume is the pacing just feels fairly, and I think it's one of the big criticisms against McFarlane as a writer is he is traditionally a pretty, he's a slow build guy. He's very meticulous in his pacing. And in the first 5 volumes, I saw bits and pieces of that, but never to an extent where I would necessarily agree with it. I definitely felt it here.
Well, it's weird though, because we get that, but we also get one of the biggest confrontations in this volume that kind of comes out of nowhere, honestly. And we will dive into that in a few issues. But let's just start with, because for any of those reading along at home that aren't in a trade, of course, it's Origins Volume 6, but otherwise it's issues 33 through 38.
Correct.
So Volume 33, issue 33, we start off with in the sewers, and we're kind of hearing who but the way it's drawn, the way it's Violator. I don't know if it's meant to be played off as who could it be.
Well, honestly, I did. Because it's just the first 2 pages, I was like, is this Clown, or is this going to end up being another character? I gotta say, just to start things off on a positive note, I think this is actually a really strong reintroduction of the Clown. Yeah. He seems a lot darker. He's not as rambly in his his evil dialogue. It's actually, I felt, an incredibly strong first couple of pages.
That's fair. I definitely think it's strong. I will say you have some throughout this volume, as again because Capullo has jumped on, McFarlane's not as focused on just that. You do have throughout the art, I think, is really solid to great through most of the issues. I mentioned it last issue, but now we're kind of getting to the point of what you visually think of as Spawn. We are kind of in that time frame of where that became the permanent new feature.
It is, and honestly, after so many issues of McFarlane and reading them in such a condensed time frame, these pages almost feel too busy. There's always a lot, and I know when Capullo first came on, I complimented the amount of background detail, but I don't know. It's just reading this, I was almost like, there's so much going on every page that it's almost overwhelming compared to the sparsity of some of the previous McFarlane Pencil Spawn issues. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it is it's a little overwhelming.
Well, you have that 1-2 punch of where McFarlane is still on art, but him and Capullo are a team on it now. So you have he's not having to shoulder as much of it. So you can definitely tell Capullo is using that to really, really rein in on going crazy on the backgrounds, on all the little details, doing what his style he'd become known for, of that really just gruff, gritty looking world. And you get that because we jump from the mysterious reintroduction of Violator in slash Clown in the sewers to him arguing with the other homeless people about, hey, I brought all this shit here. And it's a cool splash page of all the big villains who have attacked the alleyways.
Yeah, that recap page is really beautiful, and some of, like, that is top-notch Capullo.
Yeah.
I gotta say, though, Bobby is echoing me as a reader at this point. The Spawn should I stay or should I go now act, it's getting old, and I'm glad even McFarlane is acknowledging, shit or get off the pot, dude.
Yeah. The one negative I will say about a lot of this is there's a big tie-in here from the Blood Feud miniseries.
Yeah, and this is the first time I felt like, man, I kind of do wish they'd included the miniseries.
Yeah.
Because so much of the fallout of Blood Feud, it echoes through these pages. And unlike the Violator miniseries, which is like, oh, so, Violator's back and he's doing some things over here. I bet that's cool, but it didn't feel necessary. The fallout of the Angela miniseries was likewise, It echoed through the book, but it was also just like, okay, some bad shit happened to Spawn. I get it. The Blood Feud miniseries, so much happened in that, clearly happened in that I actually do kind of wish we had some kind of reference to, or no, more than just reference to it, we had a touchstone for it. If it had been included as part of this volume, or even if it had just been included as part of the Humble Bundle, I would have been a lot happier.
No, I can get behind that. It does bring some interesting moments because you have Twitch in the hospital, and that'll lead to some funny moments in this issue and the next issue.
Yeah, one of my favorite moments in the issue is just a little tiny thing that happens in a little bit, and we'll get there when we discuss it.
And then it goes from that. You find out there's kind of a snitch in the homeless camp talking and feeding Violator information. That leads to the start of a big fight with Spawn and Violator. And the one interesting
But before we get there, I'm sorry, I keep cutting off, but it's almost like page by page I have something I want to say in this particular issue. We get exactly one page of the fallout of Spawn taking on the Angel Tower, and that feels like an oversight because it feels like McFarlane puts a pin in this plot point and never gets back to it.
Sure.
And then we get a page of Jason Wynn, and this actually leads into the best through line of the volume, which is that I didn't realize that this wasn't the case up to this point because, again, I'm pretty versed in post these issues Spawn lore, but this is where Terry Fitzgerald goes to work for Jason Wynn.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very important part. I'm glad you brought that up because that does become very important in this volume and from every volume for the next several. We do that, and then we end up with the Violator Spawn fight. Which, an interesting note, though, in that fight, is we get a lot of him flat out saying and hints of him going, this idea of how the hell has your symbiote costume already evolved to this point?
Yeah, and that's something that's been touched on before in the previous issues, but having Violator come right out and say, holy shit, this is a big fucking deal. And honestly, this is probably the best fight scene of the volume. I really love this. It's still a little too chatty. McFarlane has a bit of diarrhea of the pen when it comes to Spawn versus Violator fights, I've noticed. Yeah. But the actual fight is pretty spectacular. Again, this is why I wanted to pick up Spawn as a comic, because I knew that McFarlane and his co-creators were capable of these tremendous epic bouts. This is definitely one of them.
And it's very interesting, the colors that kills it here, where it's got some very intriguing colors for water and for the fight itself. Like, it pops really well with like the bluish greenish water going on in the background. It's some very cool color schemes mixed in with like a really, really killer fight. You have some, and again, it's kind of hard to talk about because you go straight into, almost we have to kind of go straight into 34 and talk at least about beginning with this issue, because this goes straight into the finish of the fight is in the beginning of 34.
Right. Which also, before we get to the finish of the fight, I just got to say, I didn't read these issues when I was a kid, but I do remember seeing the cover for issue 35 somewhere, and it just disturbing the shit out of me.
These are all, again, with Capullo on, you get some amazing covers throughout this collection, too. See, the covers may be the MVP in some ways of this volume.
I can agree with that. I can absolutely agree with that, because the cover that opens this volume, I think, is incredibly striking. No, okay, it's the next issue. I was gonna say I am so goddamn tired of Expositional News Network. I can't even begin to discuss
Yeah,
it. But yeah, the cover that opens this volume is beautiful, and then this cover, even now, is kind of fucking me up just because of the way the Violator is puppeteering that decapitated head. It's gruesome in the best way.
And I know that you don't. We'll get to this issue later, but there also we get the first small appearance of the Freak in the background in issue 34.
Which I loved. I thought that was super, super cool. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, are we going to get to meet the Freak this issue? I was really kind of excited. I think that's a really, really cool foreshadowing.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. And I like that the first thing he does, for reasons of his own that we don't even know by the end of this volume, is more or less save the Violator from drowning.
Yeah. We get some, some really, you have Freak, and then in that 34, you also set up the, kind of another B plot going on throughout this volume of Wanda and Cyan visiting Granny.
Yes, which, man, you want to talk about MVPs.
Yeah.
Granny Blake might be my favorite supporting character of this series.
I do not know why Todd McFarlane can write her so well. But he, for some reason, out of Spawn, Todd McFarlane writes Granny and Sam and Twitch better than basically any other characters.
It's true, and I would go so far as to put Granny above Sam.
Yeah.
Like, Sam is a delight. Don't get me wrong, I really love Sam, but of that pairing, Twitch is much clearly the character that McFarlane actually cares about.
Yeah.
And then, like I say, Granny must be based on someone in his life.
I bet because
she's too human.
We know
to not have a reference point.
Again, yeah, we know, famously Todd McFarlane's wife is named Wanda and his daughter's named Cyan. It would make sense if he also probably based this on maybe his real grandmother or something like that.
Or a grandmother-in-law, something.
Something, yeah.
Because I know I keep jumping ahead to this period, but the period of comics I read from 50 to 70-something, Granny Blake plays an incredibly important role in those issues. And I remember even reading those as a kid being like, this woman is awesome. This character is so well done.
And it'll be a recurring theme, but I feel like every time in this volume, Granny pops up as a highlight, too. Like,
yes.
Every time they're talking, no matter what came before or after, it always manages to steal the show in a very emotional way that it's like that perfect melodramatic balance that Spawn goes for, and it always is hit somehow perfect when talking specifically to Granny.
Exactly. She's just a filter, maybe? She pulls something out of McFarlane as a writer that he doesn't, I don't want to say doesn't seem capable of doing otherwise, but she focuses him in a way that a lot of other characters don't. Yeah. It's really kind of fascinating as a writer myself to see that kind of maturity pulled out of him, especially against the backdrop of some really ridiculous, positive but juvenile shit.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, in a book filled with like crazy, chaotic moments and bombastic moments and over-sexualized moments and all this other stuff, you have moments with Granny that are they feel like they could be out almost any slice of life comic. They feel like they could be out of fucking Sandman at moments as far as the heart that's in it. It's insane, but you go from that, and then you have some of my favorite art. I don't know how I feel about the story going on, but you have some of my favorite art where you have your interest is like the little kid walking the streets, very young, and
before we get there, yes. I do want to just, speaking of the art, the Violator to Clown on panel transformation, and this is the first time we have seen Violator to Clown on panel transformation, is so fucking fantastic. I can hear the bones popping and the flesh rolling as this character changes. It's such a tribute to Capullo as an artist that it's such a visceral translation in 3 panels, literally just 3 panels, and it moves the character, or the visual of the character, into just another stratosphere. It's fucking spectacular.
It really is. Like, again, I will mention the art a lot because that's in a weird way, like you have when you're just a kid. Again, we've talked about McFarlane and Capullo can draw kids better than pretty much anyone else for some reason. But you're interested that this little kid walking around, they have captions about how hard his life has been, how involved in the gangland and gang wars he has been, how involved in all this life he has. He is confronted by this man who's basically looks to be forced to buy a bunch of drugs from him. Spawn follows this dude into. I will say, stylistically, the visuals are so fucking interesting of this, like, mud wrestling, these two women mud wrestling, but with, like, these giant, happy, smiley faces with people peering in to watch them.
And, so, anyway, I made a note about this.
Yeah.
It feels very 90s-ish. First, the kid shit, scared to buy drugs, is really a dealer, sorry to spoil. And then the big dealer jerking off in the porn arena, a la Crow City of Angels.
Yeah.
That is so 90s to me.
It is, and I don't know why, like, visually, again, art's fucking amazing, but visually, just very interesting juxtaposition of going between these moments, and I was, like, again, I don't know if it's my favorite, like, the storyline that's going on, but going back to the art.
It's not mine, because it's hyperbolic to the point of boredom. It's like, you can't play every note at its highest and loudest pitch. It loses, impact if you do that. And, I just feel like these few pages are just overwrought in their writing. It's amazing. It's kind of funny because we could juxtapose that with literally 2 pages earlier where you have Cyan, Wanda, and Grandma, and it's beautiful and fantastic. And then you get to this part, and it's McFarlane, playing that G chord as high and as hard as he can.
I almost wonder though if the juxtaposition is on purpose to compare like the life that Wanda's at and where Al's at right now, of going between this serene family setting of being close and connected, and the next one is, like you said, drug dealer jerking off in the corner, watching hypersexualized women mud wrestle with these weird, crazy designs going on of smiley faces.
Yeah.
So I don't.
And then the blood splash, which is actually hits one of the women in the eye, a la Jason X.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny.
Yeah. No, it's not bad. There's some fun there. It is interesting because going from a scene that you could talk about, it's like Sandman going over like Tim Vigil's Faust kind of stuff, where it's like you go.
That's an interesting comparison.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not
saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, wow, what an amazing comparison.
I feel like it is because I can go from this sweet granny talking about the meaning of life with her kids moment to essentially a scene of mimicking jacking off blood into mud wrestlers.
Yeah. Exactly right.
That's a side thing. I've always wondered. I don't know if there's any interviews about Vigil's feelings on Spawn. I would love to read it just because that does seem like Faust came to the party first, but was this underground outlaw comic that a lot of people, ignored except for that specific fan base, and Spawn comes along with a very similar theme and idea, and blows the fuck up. To a different point. I would just be curious because it's like Faust is one of the most. That's a whole different topic. It's one of the most interesting points in comics in my mind because it's such a oddly influential book for what it is.
Yeah,
and also one of the most like overtly late '80s, early '90s comics ever made.
Yeah, I admit I don't think I've ever read an issue of Faust, but I am honestly pretty familiar with it just because it was such a big and important comic in the underground scene.
It's like I would say probably up there with probably the Crow as far as like that specific like Tundra, Blizzard, even like Mirage to a degree era of underground comics.
It was a big enough underground comic that I read about it in Wizard magazine, which should tell you something.
There's a movie they made I want to see.
Really?
Yeah, I've heard it is again not great, but it's one of those weird '90s things where they made a Faust movie, and I've never seen it, and it's hard to find because out of print, obviously, much like Faust itself.
Yeah.
But I want to see it. But to get away from Faust, back to Spawn, another man who sold his soul to the devil.
Right?
Then we get the unfortunate, and the one complaint I have with Spawn, and I know some people love it, and this might be a controversial idea for our listeners. I know you mentioned earlier, I do not love the news breaks. I don't know why McFarlane, to this day, has moments of loving them. They're not gone away, and it makes you sad.
It's the influence of Frank Miller is never more obvious than in the Expositional News Network pages, because it is such an obvious take, homage, ripoff, call it what you will, of the very similar thing that Miller did in Dark Knight Returns. But Dark Knight Returns is a 4-issue miniseries, and it uses those fairly sparingly, all things considered. The fact that McFarlane is still doing this 35 issues later, it's exhausting by this point.
Oh, yeah, we are in issue 34, and we've probably seen it in at least 18 to 20 issues, I'd say.
Yeah, that feels right.
Like, it's...
And that's 16 to 18 issues too many.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, they're not going anywhere. They popped up. To this day, they pop up randomly.
I'm not horrifically surprised. And I will say, it is definitely a choice as a writer to again, be expositional, remind the audience of certain plot points, focus on what the wider world is thinking about the story that you're telling. It's not the worst way to do that. But the fact that, again, it's kind of like I was saying about the hyperbolicism of the drug dealer pages. It's the same thing over and over and over again, and after a while it loses impact. And again, 34 issues into this series, and he's still doing it. These pages, I literally sigh every time I swipe left on my iPad and another one comes up. I am exhausted by them before I even read them at this point.
Intermittently, they have moments of coming off poignant and cool, and it makes sense to the story, but so many times when they pop up, it just feels like, oh, here they are. Anyway, luckily we get past that point, and then we kind of get another thing that'll be important. We get the major team-up of Wynn and Violator.
Yeah, which... classic comic book trope. Neither one of these bad guys have been able to stop the hero on their own. Perhaps together, pooling their resources, they can accomplish more. I like it. It's a very Marvel thing to do.
Yep.
I'm cool with it. I don't know if it needs the dialogue and page space that it gets, but the overall plotting is fine.
Yeah, it's good. We also didn't get a little very 90s, but still, I think still relatively funny thing of Sam seeing a very attractive female in the hallway.
Twitch is married to Mary Jane Watson.
Yeah.
That's who that is.
Following her in, and having Twitch. Not only that, we saw, we see Twitch's kids, we see all that, and we see his very Mary Jane wife.
Yeah, my favorite Twitch moment is his the darts all hitting the bullseye.
Yeah.
It's cute. It's of course. I mean, it's a very bullseye thing to do. But we've already established that Twitch is a crack shot, so it's a cute moment. And the fact that he's doing it left-handed is pretty cool too. I knew this gag was coming because I remembered it either being talked about or maybe they made a reference to it in the cartoon. I can't remember. So I knew as soon as I saw the redhead, I was like, okay, there's Twitch's hot wife. I don't know. It's not a bad gag. I just it was so obvious that I don't know. It just didn't do anything for me.
I like it. I think it's just I like Twitch and Sam's life getting explored more, and I just like this weird. Again, you can tell anytime Sam and Twitch are on page, you can tell McFarlane's having fun writing whatever they're doing, and that'll again becomes a constant. And then we finally get some more Cog and talking to Spawn about how like you mentioned earlier about, hey, I know you think you saved that kid. That kid is just as bad as that person. He sells more drugs. He has been in more. He's gotten off every time because he is a kid.
Yeah.
You can't. You are literally doing exactly what hell wants you to do. And all that, and then you mentioned, and then it wraps up with Wynn and Terry. Terry working for Wynn.
Yeah, and also this is where I feel like the molasses pacing kind of kicks in a little bit. Because this whole volume, there's a lot of Cog being mysterious with Spawn when I feel like he doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
You know, the what do you want from me? For you to focus, use your power wisely. Like it or not, you were assassinated under orders. Stop the denials. What you are is still a part of you. You know, all that. That's not helpful advice. If you really wanted him to do something, why are you holding back the information that we're going to learn next issue, other than McFarlane needed a plot point for next issue? And if he needed that plot point for next issue, why did he blow 3 pages of story doing nothing in this one? It's not, again, it's not bad.
Yeah.
But it is noticeably poorly paced in a way that I haven't really seen that in previous volumes.
That's very fair, and I think that slow, methodical style, again, Spawn can definitely be guilty of, and we are going to go in and out of those phases where you can almost tell when McFarlane is getting very excited and ready to go. Because this is also where, again, this happens to this day, but for better or worse, you start seeing like the captains of referencing stuff that happened 20 issues ago.
Right.
And that is, when you're reading it in this format, it's not as bad, but when it's coming out weekly, it is crazy to be like, okay, issue 37, we are in like, year 4 or 5 of Spawn existing. We're into it between everything going on. That's awesome, but that's a long time to be like, hey, go see issue 12. Go see issue 11.
Yeah. It's true.
This or that. And again, that doesn't get any better. And even though I would argue in today's current climate,
it feels like McFarlane's vamping for time when he's literally got all the time in the world.
Yeah. I think that's fair at times. And because, I think that's why it may feel like we're blowing through these issues, but I think that's partly because of there's a lot of, not long, I wouldn't say long-winded, because there is conversations that have meaning, but there are a lot of conversations that have a lot of text and a lot of, this is what's happening. This is what's going to happen. This is what we need to happen. And like you said, none of it's bad. A lot of it is building, but it's definitely that slow, methodical. You don't know this information that you'll learn next issue or issue later. You don't know this, even though sometimes there's not necessarily a reason to withhold that information.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Because even then, like, we go into that pretty much goes straight into 35, where we do, I think, a cool moment of we get the welcome back Twitch party of Sam secretly.
I love this splash page.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
And like the whole idea of Sam doesn't want to take credit for it, but clearly Sam set up this welcome back party, and like that little line of like, oh, it just happens that there's be like 15 extra sized donuts here.
Yeah, the jelly-filled mega donuts. Yeah, and then also the fact that Chief Banks is still being drawn as a '70s era smug as shit. Stan Lee, a la Jack Kirby's take on him in Miracle Man, whose name I'm currently blanking on, so I'm trying to vamp for time here.
Yeah.
He was in the Miracle Man miniseries by Tom King. He was the babysitter.
Oh, Mr. Miracle.
Yeah, Mr. Miracle. What's his babysitter's name?
I don't know. It's like some weird thing.
I should know this. Hold on.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I'm pulling out my nice hardcover, available only in comic stores volume of Mr. Miracle, and flipping through it to see if I can find that character whose name I'm currently blanking on for some goddamn reason, even though I should know it.
It sounds like, I want to say it's like a 50s or 60s sounding name, but I can't remember what it is. It's like some weird, like, very, I don't know. It's
like R.J. Shyster, was for the bad guy. Why does this suck?
I can't remember. I cannot remember for the life of me, to be honest.
Man, somebody is yelling into their microphone right now that it's the name of the character. God damn it! I keep trying to trick myself into saying it. And it's not working.
I'm horrible with names to begin with.
Funky Flashman.
Yeah.
Funky Flashman. Yes, that is very much a Funky Flashman era Chief Banks Stanley take, and I am okay with it. I think it's hilarious. I'm glad they're committing to the bit. It makes me happy.
Well, and this also where you start having, Sam and Twitch flat out acknowledging that they're the ones who are causing the trouble and hinting hardcore at it. And you also have a great moment with Twitch being like, I just want to get out of this party so we can get back to work.
Yeah.
And then you have that, and you go straight into what we mentioned earlier, where you have some really interesting lines, finding out that Spawn's suit evolved 7 years earlier than most Spawns ever have.
Yeah, and again, they keep harping on that, and I love it, and it's good detail. But it's also, this is the third or fourth issue where that's been acknowledged without any. What are the consequences of that? What are you trying to say other than this is a big deal? You keep telling us this is a big deal, but you haven't told us why.
True. That's fair too. Yeah, you get. Again, I can't help notice the art. You also get the first big hint of Cog having some kind of weird powers over the suit because he touches Spawn and is able to make it disperse from his face.
Right, while also doing something that so far has only happened because Malbolgia allowed it, or because Spawn's fragmented memories have kind of clicked, which is we get one of those amazing psychedelic pages of him having a memory and realizing that Jason Wynn was the one that ordered his death, which again, I actually didn't realize had not been revealed up to this point because it's such a key component to Spawn media outside of the comic that it's something I've known for ages, and it never clicked with me that we didn't actually know that Wynn ordered Chapel to pull the trigger until I actually read it in this issue.
Yeah, that's very true. And then you get Wynn and Banks talking, and then we get another really good Granny scene of getting hints that Wynn is in the background setting something up with Granny and every member of Terry's family, like Clown had kind of talked about. Then you get some...
Yeah, the donations to Wanda's... charity, Granny having her financial issues taken care of, Terry's promotion. Wynn clearly has a vested interest in fucking with the Fitzgerald family, and that's actually a boiling subplot that I feel like is well handled as far as just keeping it in the background. I know I've been very bitchy about these comics, but that is definitely a plot point that I'm like, that is exactly how you handle a subplot.
Yeah.
Well done, McFarlane.
That part is very good. And then you have some interesting stuff. If you have Banks going to confront Spawn, so him taking these very rough cops into the alleys, trying to find him, asking people. And you have a kind of...
Man, reading that page in today's environment, not to put too fine points on where we are right now in history, that was... uncomfortable in a good way, question mark. It was uncomfortable because it did exactly what it needed to do as far as character work, but also just like, yeesh, this comic was put out in like 1994, and we knew then that, you know, cops can be shits.
No, it's very interesting, like how honestly relevant a lot of Spawn still is, for better and worse.
Well, we talked about that a lot last volumes.
It's very interesting. You get him there. You have a moment I actually kind of like, because you have in the background this shady homeless person in a trench coat hat and not doing much, and then it's slowly revealed in the background that it's Spawn. And then you have Spawn confronting Banks, who of course doesn't know quite the extent of Spawn's powers, and off-screen taking out his guards and confronting him. And then you of course have Sam and Twitch running to be like, basically not quite save Banks, but also make sure that Spawn doesn't make things harder for them or worse for them.
Yeah, okay, so there's both things that I like about this a lot and things that I fucking hate. Thing that I like, the actual confrontation between Spawn, Sam, and Twitch is wonderful. Yeah. It's so great to see these guys on panel talking. The frenemy status they have is great.
And that's another slow build that's been going on. Like we've only seen Sam, Twitch, and Spawn on the same page very rarely through these 35 issues. Mm-hmm. It's been very sparse. In the Hunt, we saw it a little bit, and we see like them close.
That was the first time we saw them together. Was in the Hunt, and that was 23 issues in.
Yeah, and we see like hints here and there. Or they get close, but it's very rare. And you have him kind of feel like, well, I gave you the file. Why don't you give more? Like try and do it the right way, and then you find out Spawn putting together, and them telling him that the chief is the one that's the person who basically ordered Kincaid, and you had that whole moment of him being like, that's
the thing that I hated. And let me tell you why.
Oh, yeah?
I refuse to believe that someone as thorough as Spawn did not read the files before he gave them out. So the fact that Burke backing Kincaid is news to Spawn, that rang so false for me. It made me angry at Spawn as a character to be like, why did your lazy ass not peruse the file that you were... why did you not know the information that you were given to these cops to get dirt on Wynn or on Banks? How would you know that file doesn't even had dirt?
I guess I just took it that he didn't know what Banks looked like.
Okay, that's okay.
Because I just took it when he I can't remember. Let me look up really quick because I just remember I don't know if he knew it was Banks where he's like, I can't remember, but yeah, because how it's presented, I was like, I don't know. But again, it's not like super clear either way because you would think maybe he would know Banks too, but at the same time, that's how I read it was he just thought it was another cop trying to push around the homeless people, and when you find out that was who it was, is when he kind of has a meltdown, and then of course, as always, escapes much like Batman or any hero, escapes pretty easily from Sam Twitch and every cop going on there. And then you intersperse that we mentioned earlier with Wanda talking about her charity getting money as Cyan and Terry play.
And Cyan kicks him in the nuts.
Yep.
And it is honestly one of my favorite Terry moments in this series to date.
It's pretty great.
It's adorable.
It's very relatable.
Yes, it is. That's exactly what I was going to say. It is so relatable. If I may be allowed a small story, when I was a kid, I was probably 16, 17. I was in high school. I had been babysitting my mom's friends' children, and they were youngish. They were probably 8, 10 years old, around that age. So not like terrifically like babies, but still younger than me. And one of them was exactly the older boy, 10-year-old boy, crotch height for me. I'm sure you can see where this is going. The next time I saw him, he ran up to me and gave me a huge hug. He is crotch height to me. He headbutted me in the testicles.
Yep.
And it was the sweetest thing because he wanted to give me a hug, and that was the sweetest thing. And I nearly cried, not because it was so sweet, but because I'd just taken a forehead to the testicles.
Yeah.
So I absolutely, like you said, this page is so relatable and funny, and a good, like you mentioned earlier, such a wonderful slice of life moment in this series that McFarlane, I'm glad he peppers these in. I'm glad he doesn't lean on them. But I'm also glad that he puts them in when he does because they feel very strategically story-wise.
I agree. It's what Robert Kirkman tries to do a lot that I feel like he doesn't do as well, and he does over rely on them on times to have these he'll have entire Walking Dead example of several issues of just trying to remind you, oh no, these are nice family people who care about each other. And before this, I think it's paced really well. But then you get something I don't know how I feel about, which is you go from slow pacing to very fast, because right after that, you jump straight to Spawn is invading Wind Tower and is going after him hardcore.
I'm so surprised that you're not sure how you feel about these pages, because honestly, I thought this last sequence was fantastic.
Oh, it's great. It's a great sequence, but mention the slow build. We had the slow build, and she's like, nope, there's no like him.
No, we learned earlier in this issue that Wynn is responsible for Chapel, and then Spawn just fucking goes in there and decides to fuck him up.
Yep.
But we also get an almost Brian K. Vaughan level cliffhanger.
Yep,
I adore.
We get the reverse. We know that Terry is working with Wynn, but Spawn doesn't, and Spawn doesn't know why. So you have from the core out.
It's not just that.
Yeah.
It's that Terry pulls a gun and has a gun on Spawn, saying, take a step back. It's not that simple. It really is. You understand why the very next page, the very first page of the next issue is Spawn screaming, "You traitor." Because after everything they've been through together, after everything Spawn has done behind Terry's back to keep his family safe and taken care of, this is a hole in the fucking heart. And it is so well handled.
It is. The only thing I didn't love about the beginning of issue 36 is you have a lot of exposition for stuff I don't think you need exposition for.
Yeah, especially with that beautiful splash page. You don't need it. So you could have done without all of it and just had that beautiful Capullo splash page.
I did an experiment where I read the issue one time without reading everything. I read it again though, with only reading the dialogue and not the exposition. I think it actually is paced better and works better that way.
This is my shocked face. I think it's a crutch that McFarlane continues to lean on is his overly expositional captions.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. He's such a visual artist. He did it when he was drawing the book. He does it with Capullo drawing the book. He over relies on language, and it's so clearly unnecessary.
Yeah, it's very. You don't need it because again, the art tells a story. The emotion is all there. The dialogue hits perfectly. You don't need to, remember this happened this issue. Remember this happened this issue. Remember all the stuff because it works so well, and it's to the point where it's like I know it helps up the melodrama. The melodrama helps set up a lot of stuff, but at the same time, if you're just reading it, the pacing wise, again, if you're reading at home, I almost recommend that if you see yellow exposition, and especially in these issues, fucking don't read it almost because
skip it. It's almost like I'm trying to think. I kind of did want to call out a specific writer, but I don't want to call out a specific writer. But it's like comics, especially DC comics in the Silver Age and in the '60s.
Yeah.
It's like Superman jumps out a window to save the Lois, and the art is Superman jumping out of a window with Lois falling, and it's like, we get it, dude. Trust your artist. And again, what boggles me is that McFarlane is an artist. He's a visual storyteller.
In fairness to him,
why not trust the art?
Fairness to him, he does it when he's drawing the art too.
That's what I'm saying. I mentioned that earlier. He does the same thing. It's almost like it's almost like he doesn't trust his own art. It's not like, and it's like he doesn't. I don't feel like it's not trust, but it's just like, what other reason could you see to pack these endless squares of, again, melodramatic description when the dialogue is perfectly cromulent and the art is spectacular?
Yeah, no, it's weird because the first good chunk of this issue is a fight with Wynn and Spawn outrunning Wynn's people from throughout the building. It's this great chase, and again, the art sells it all. Dialogue's great. You don't really need a lot of stuff. The only stuff you need is you can get a lot of them talking on the intercom and talking through the radio about he's doing this, that are again very, very much like year one. Going back to very year one of him like escaping when the first time Batman can't handle what's going on, him kind of escaping the building with too many people and too much stuff.
And that works because, again, you see the quotation marks. Essentially, it makes it dialogue. And again, the dialogue in this issue is not really a problem.
No,
It's the unbearable, endless captions. And even though those are captions, they read as dialogue and they function as dialogue. And that actually, it does help push the story along. I agree.
And that ends with you have Wynn ordering an attack on the building, and Spawn, again, also a very clever way of saying that Spawn survived, but had to use his power to survive, of just having the power meter pop up.
Yeah.
It was a very smart way where you have a lot of again, exposition saying stuff like that, and you have the dialogue hinting one way, but it's set up very well, and that leads into, speaking of good dialogue, you have a great 2-page of Sam and Twitch talking about how, even though they turned stuff in, Banks basically got a slap on the wrist. He got less for this than they did for something they had nothing to do with. And you also get
Kincaid being found in their office. Yeah.
And then you get one of the first time Twitch just goes off on Banks in a great fashion of telling him every reason why Banks is not in as control as he thinks he is, and every way that Sam and Twitch are still going to bring him down and still have the upper hand.
I still feel like there's too much dialogue on these 2 pages. There's just it's a sea of words. It works, but I do feel like if McFarlane had an editor that wasn't McFarlane, somebody would have told him to probably cut the dialogue down by about a third on these pages, and I think it would be.
These next are because then you get another granny scene, which again we've talked about. Granny scenes always work. Just some very cute stuff. Then again, the return of our favorite news page, which tells us what we just read, and it's not. And again, it does it from a different viewpoint and how how it's selling to the world. Which parts that I do appreciate. Like, oh, this is what what they're telling the people. It's why people aren't freaking out. It's why people don't know about it.
And again, that is the function of a page like this, and I do like it when McFarlane uses these pages to, like you say, explore the world's reaction to all of this. but I feel like he doesn't do that nearly enough.
Yeah. Then we get Jason Wynn in the hospital, very beat up, very broken. Of course, Spawn earlier we didn't mention, but he viciously breaks Wynn's arm. We hear in the hospital, and he's talking to his higher-ups, people who are much higher than him, and then basically saying, hey, you're on your own now. We're not going to back you anymore. You just bombed something in your own city. You can't handle this. You're clearly losing it. We're not backing you anymore. And then you have, in the background, Violator pop up, which is one of my favorite things, is him basically saying, hey, you're doing too good of a job of pissing Spawn off.
Yeah.
You need to slow your roll a little bit. I appreciate what you're doing. You're doing it really well. We can't handle him right now. Slow down.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. It's a really good juxtaposition, and I didn't really notice it until you're talking about it just now. Wynn is getting it from both angles. He is getting raw dogged forgive my incredibly gross description. Yeah. You know, he's getting skewered. He's getting raw dogged here from both directions. His human higher ups are like, you fucked up, and his satanic help is like, hey, cool it. That's actually an amazing story juxtaposition. Again, I applaud McFarlane. That is a really well done 2 pages right there.
And then, of course, Spawn, still pissed off, forcibly running to Wanda's house and basically being like, why don't you remember I'm here, and trying to, flat out saying, but doing everything except flat out saying I'm Allison's, giving her hints at who he is, and her being terrified to death. And I don't know. That's another thing I don't know.
I think he gives so much more than hints.
Yeah.
Because she asks, "Who are you?" He says, "Don't you know?" And her response is, "No, you aren't my husband. He's dead."
Yeah.
So clearly, she's given some thought to that angle too.
Yeah. And saying, there's some good lines about I could tell her every little detail, and even though I'm not sure if I'm a huge fan of how terrified she is, knowing that he's already saved Terry once and everything. But
the last time he confronted her, she was terrified as well, and he casually murdered 3 dudes in front of her, which freaked her the fuck out. So the last time she saw him, he came off as violent and unstable, and now he's in her home.
True. She
has no protection, and her daughter's there.
It does have a great line of Cyan talking to Wanda being, does my mama know you? And him having that a very subtle, I thought she did, I guess not anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's actually a really good thing. And then ending on Spawn being super brooding and super pissed off.
Very 90s.
Very, very 90s. And then we get into the issue that is going to be very interesting. Because again, this is an Alan Moore issue 37.
And I'm just gonna say this right out front. This is the single worst issue of Spawn I've read up to this point.
I will definitely. I can't put it anywhere near Houdini still, because I feel like
that's fair. That is fair. But if I may be allowed to maybe go into a little before we. Do you want to talk about the issue and then talk about my problems?
We'll kind of talk through it because essentially you have the freak who was mentioned earlier. You have a very pissed off. The only thing I'll give it a little bit of credit for. I think what it's going for, and it doesn't always hit this well, is 2 things. One is you have a very, very, very pissed off and angry Spawn who's just willing to want to go out and fucking do something.
Which may actually address one of my issues with the book, now that you've said that.
And I don't think it's set up very well, but reading it back to back, I think what they're going for is he is so pissed off he just wants to go do something. So you have the freak who's been hiding in the sewers.
He wants to go fuck somebody up, yeah.
You have the freak who's been hiding in the sewers and kind of makes his way up to Spawn as these other people are confronting him, and Spawn sees it happening, and it's like, why the fuck, basically pissed off, you're messing with him, you're not, and him be like, hey, don't worry about, him saving the freak, and the freak being overly gratitude. The one thing I don't think works, and it's weird, it's a very Alan Moore thing to do, and it doesn't work, is throughout it you have these little bitty dialogue things hinting at the freak's real previous life, and he's telling a story about his life, of how mundane his life used to be. And all stuff.
And you're absolutely right. They don't work. They don't work at all.
Yeah, I don't think they ever pay off in the way that they normally would, which, again, is surprising knowing Alan Moore as someone who excels at stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really. So you have the freak kind of lead Spawn down to his lair in the sewers. You have him trying to convince what's going on, saying that this story of how this evil doctor had killed his wife and child and had done this horrible stuff to him, and so of course Spawn's like, oh fuck, yeah, I can get behind that, I'll go. Yeah. Spawn finds her, and then along the way you have little things that something's not right, because then he mentions that this man killed my mom and dad, and he's like, what are you talking about? You said your wife and kid, and he's like, I said my family. He killed them all. He killed everything. And then going through painting him as the one thing I get where Alan Moore is going from. He's trying to paint him as like this very '90s villain of melodramatic, over the top soap opera of experimentation, evolution, government, shady government involved, all this other stuff. And again, Spawn, who has been in the thick of it for this long, and the Freak, who has clearly been kind of in the background listening on Violator and Spawn, having these moments, is taking advantage of it. And of course, he kills this doctor. There's a couple stuff where it does get kind of where I'm like, I don't know if this sells well, of like police confronting all of them, and Spawn and the Freak fighting police officers. He's
just
like,
massacring police officers. Yeah.
And all this. But again, I guess you could also get Spawn is also now ran through several police trying to kill him for no reason. So that might be part of it too. And as not super shocking, but as you have to reveal that the Freak is just a mentally deranged patient who's escaped. And none of it, of course, nobody says it's true. We're introduced to his ex-wife, who basically says, he wanted kids and went very crazy after I didn't want kids anymore. Or I didn't want kids. And he went crazy, and then you find out, no, that was just a normal doctor he killed, and the Freak is now
Which makes no sense. If it's the normal doctor he killed, why does he have, he talks about having muscle enhancements and other, surgically enhanced parts, but why? And he kind of acts on that too. He's obviously got some kind of agility things going on. He's very skilled in some kind of combat apparently. But it doesn't make any sense if that's the case. If the doctor's just a normal doctor, and then also why the orderlies are so violent when Spawn and the Freak initially confront them before we meet the doctor. And this may be just because Capullo drew them as very hulking and menacing, but they're treated as hench people, not orderlies, for what turns out to be supposedly a very normal doctor.
I think what Moore is clearly going for is like showing that, hey, in his deconstructionist way, hey, this is how this could look like it's something crazy, but it's not. It's just a normal thing that has been blown up, and he found someone and took advantage of him. But at the same time, that's a problem. That's one of my big problems with the story, and I think you've mitigated it a little bit by just pointing out that if you read this back to back with last issue, Spawn is in a very bad place and just kind of wants to fuck something up. But one thing that really did disappoint me about this issue, one of the things that I really disliked, was how easily Spawn is tricked in this issue by the Freak. Well, I mean, his sob story is again hyperbolic and overly dramatic, but I mean the rest of the series is. But the fact that Spawn just absolutely buys it without any kind of questioning, that really bugged me. And again, you've mitigated that with your explanation, but it just didn't sit right with me that this, supposedly very competent dude has this blind spot for this issue with this guy he just met. The problem is this happens sporadically through Spawn, where it's like we saw this happen with Trimmer. We saw this happen with
which was also an issue that wasn't great.
Yeah, with the Frank Miller gangs, where it's sporadically,
which was terrible.
Yeah, which is sporadically Spawn is just confronted in this weird world of Spawn with something crazy. It's like, well, fuck it, I guess this is probably true because look what else I've seen. And also, I think part of this, Alan Moore has not written Spawn because his last issue he wrote was mostly Billy Kincaid.
Right.
And
he built the lore of Spawn, but he didn't really write Al Simmons.
Yeah, so part of me is wondering if it's some of the dialogue reflects an earlier version of Spawn we saw in the first 14 issues that no longer is really that Spawn.
That's fair. My final complaint, I feel like the Freak is a really sad and unworkable retread of the Creeper from Steve Ditko.
Yeah, I agree. It's very similar to Creeper, and I think it's also like Alan Moore trying to make a character kind of like the Max or another mentally disturbed 90s character, but kind of a play on the more grounded version of what that would mean.
Yeah.
I don't think it hits extremely well, especially in this issue.
I don't think it hits at all.
But I think that's what he's going for. And, it's very odd. It's because it's definitely not my... It's weird because an Alan Moore issue, an interesting idea of a character, but never quite... It's definitely, out of these issues, it is my least favorite.
Okay, I'm glad we're kind of on the same page there. And yeah, it's so funny because I've of course heard of the Freak.
Yeah.
I had a basic concept of who the Freak was, and when I saw the Freak's shadow, when I saw him foreshadowed earlier, I was like, oh shit, do we introduce the Freak in this issue? I'm so excited. I'm very curious about this character. And then I read his origin issue, and I am so crushingly disappointed.
Yeah, it's not.
It's so bad.
It's not my favorite by any means. I don't know, and it is sad because I think it's weird. Because the next issue, we also get an interesting character, and I will talk about it in a minute, but me personally, I think it's done a million times better.
I was going to say, issue 38 is bad in a good way.
Yeah, we can. I don't know if there's much more to say about 37, because it is a very, like...
I have nothing.
It is, I mean, it's Freak's origin story, and that's about it, and you get a little tease at the end that Freak is now wanting to hunt Spawn.
Yeah.
And that's about... That's it. The art is still great. Like, everything looks creepy and weird and great.
I cannot fault Capullo on this issue. I do think, honestly, I feel like the Freak's character design is a little lazy. It's very much by Freak and Freak of Nature. I think they're definitely trying to call back the idea that this is some kind of hippie burnout with the shirtless, with the jeans, with the medallion, the long hair.
He looks very Iggy Pop inspired.
Oh yeah.
And I think knowing Capullo's love of punk and metal, I could see that being a thing, because he is very, like, even comparing, like, going back to the Crow, like, Happy Boy and stuff like that, it's very that same type of, like, super skinny, crazy, his body's constantly contorting in weird ways. I think that's what they're going for.
That's fair. Okay, that's a really good call.
I don't know for sure. I haven't read enough about if that's what it is or not, but yeah, it's weird. But then we go to 38, and to me, 38... does something that I don't think that... Because even in my notes, I just have the Freak origin written down. 38 does something that is, I think, great and brilliant. I don't think they meant to, but they fucking explain why the world is so weird.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say that as well, because on my first reading, I was like, "Why the fuck are you putting cybernetics into a gorilla? We've already established that cybernetics are a perfectly reasonable thing in this world." And then I was like, "Oh, that's because he's been doing it forever. That was from a really long ass time ago."
They hint that this issue basically sets up the thing of, instead of Operation Paperclip and America getting a bunch of scientists from Germany and Switzerland and Russia and a bunch of different places and coming over and making advancements in different ways. Essentially, after World War II, they had a different operation where they came over and started making cybernetic designs.
Yes, exactly. And that's, again, it's ridiculous, but it's ridiculous in the best way.
It's fucking brilliant, because it kind of sets up why the entire 90s image superhero world exists.
Right, exactly.
Because it's why Youngblood had a lot of stuff. It's like, they were trying to make superheroes and make cybernetic advancements instead. Essentially, this issue, you have a investigator named Chris coming into this weird mansion and watching these tapes about essentially a mad scientist from Switzerland, is it Switzerland?
I think so.
Because it's Geneva he's from, right?
Yeah.
And he falling in love with this nurse during the war, and even though he's having to constantly heal, there's a great line about healing these, as he was healing, the only thing keeping him from healing these men was her being by his side. He's kind of forced over to America because it's the only way he can financially continue his studies because she gets sick. He's trying to save her. He brings her in. It's a very, like, this issue is very Frankenstein meets Lovecraft.
Yeah, but it's also interspersed with an interesting question mark retcon. The idea that Spawn saving the president was actually what put him on Wynn's hit list in the first place.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's so clearly not what was intended when that bit of detail was first given to the character, because it's so clear in those early issues that it was just, again, part of that, sexiest man alive, save the president. This is the reason we're talking about this, assassin on Entertainment Network, is because he's also like this really handsome and popular dude.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Spawn. Everybody loves Al Simmons. So it's an interesting retcon to actually pull that back and say there's actually a deeper game at play here.
Yeah.
But again, it also kind of feels it's nodding towards McFarlane's penchant for slow playing stories to the point where it almost feels like we're not moving forward. We're dancing in place.
That's fair too, and I think it's a cybernetic simian program, is what their Operation Paperclip is basically.
Yes, and it's the first appearance of Cygor, and I love it.
I do too.
I think it's goofy as shit in the best way. Nothing says comics to me like cybernetic gorillas, and the fact that Spawn has one of those, it's a thrill. It's a really wonderful throwback thrill.
It's a real fun thing too, because throughout it you get very Lovecraft of them talking and typing what's going on, and it's where inner dialogue works actually, of him going through this basically Arkham Asylum-esque place that's been abandoned and no one knows why. And as he's learning more information, and he finally hears the doctor talk about, it's here. There's something you can't let it get out. Oh, God help whoever gets in here! And he finally stumbles upon a giant cybernetically enhanced gorilla, Cygor.
Yeah.
Also, in those Spawn moments, though, one of my favorite fucking McFarlane lines is in there of him talking about, or he's picking up the guns and cleaning off the guns from earlier. The great line of talking about he's known Wynn for so long. This is his target. This is who did this to him, and it's a great line of familiarity breeds intensity.
Yeah, that's a really good line.
For a Spawn, that's kind of him going after Wynn is very going back, very pro wrestling promo moment, but it works so well for what the story is and what's going on.
Yeah.
And then you also get it's one of the final pages it might be the final page in the book, but my favorite Granny moment in this scene of Spawn going to talk to Granny, and again, just another fucking great little moment of him telling her what, this great line of when he met Angela and Angel saying, you have there's a place in heaven waiting for you, and her being thrilled to death and all this great stuff, and, her talking about, Wanda still loves you. She saw a demon that did this, but she's convinced it wasn't you. And then this whole line of I thought this was true, I thought this wasn't, and her just walking through. Let me show you a picture of her daughter.
Yeah,
and it's a great
and also
ending.
I love the line. I love the exchange. There must be some way you can keep that evil man away.
Yeah,
and Spawn's response, "I'm trying."
Yeah,
that's beautiful,
great.
Man.
It's great. The Granny stuff is great. It is weird because this is kind of roller coaster stuff, but I feel like the last 3 pages of this volume are fucking incredible.
Agreed.
You get a cybernetic gorilla killing a man, Spawn, and then Spawn visiting Granny, and having this emotional. It almost perfectly encapsulates the spirit of Spawn of a cybernetic gorilla killing a man, followed by a deeply emotional, poignant moment between an elderly woman and her son-in-law.
Yeah. Also, I'm so sorry. I love Tony Daniel. This is not Tony Daniels at Tony Daniel yet. This art is kind of terrible.
This is again, I was going to mention.
So many people have weirdly extended necks and just.
This is
ridiculous.
This is early Tony Daniel, which I had almost forgotten was a part of Spawn for a little bit. Yeah, you have early Tony Daniel art, and it is crazy to see McFarlane's eye for artists, though, of who he would pick up early in their career from, again, seeing Capullo and Tony Daniel in their early kind of incubation stages is crazy.
Yeah,
this is very much Tony Daniel in his I like Frank Miller mode. And that's not horrible, but it's definitely, knowing it's Tony Daniel is kind of disappointing going down from knowing Capullo was before. Again, though, great cover. I like the cover a lot.
Oh, yeah. The cover is really exciting, and I really like the design of the Mad Scientist. I think that's a really cool faux 1940s Germanic design.
Yeah.
But everybody has such weird goddamn necks.
Yeah, it is.
And it's like you said, incubating is a really good term for this, because it does not feel at all like the Tony Daniel that we see penciling, Batman.
Yeah, no, it's got its ups and downs, but again, overall, this as much as it's weird to say, I know we always ask this question, 38 actually might be my favorite issue of this bunch. It's so fun.
I can see that. I was going to ask which one was yours, and I can definitely see why that would be your pick.
It's fun. It's got possibly my favorite line, and again, I love that ending. I think it has one of the best endings of a Spawn issue, of just this, again, very poignant, meaningful moment. And again, constantly playing with the fact that she's blind, but not in like an overly like, oh, I can't see type of way. I need help, or I'm running a wall kind of moment that so many comics, especially an Image comic from the '90s, would typically handle a blind elderly woman.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. No, it's I think it's great. It also sums up a lot of what's happened earlier in an issue that's not very focused on Spawn, and setting up a new villain for the future. And unlike the Freak, setting up a new villain where it's like, oh shit, this seems like an actual threat to Spawn.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. If I may, I would say my favorite issue of this volume has got to be 35, because I like the confrontation between Banks, Spawn, and the detectives. Even if I'm not in love with the whole Kincaid being a revelation bit. I like the Cyan Terry moment, Spawn confronting Wynn, finding out who Wynn is, confronting Wynn, and then finding Terry defending Wynn. I feel like those are all, really well done, well executed emotional moments. I like the splash page that begins the issue with Sam and Twitch's party. To me, 35 is the strongest of issue, like as a package, as everything seems to hit right in a way that every other issue in this volume I found some pretty deep shit to complain about. Even 38, which I really like a lot. It's the one that I think really fires on the most levels.
Yeah, no, I can see that, and we're getting, it's like, again, this was a very, I keep saying, but a very rebuilding phase for Spawn, and we're about to, and again, it's rebuilding I think for better, because we're about, Volume 7, which will be next, is a fucking, if I remember correctly, very fun issues. It's 38 sets up Volume 7 very well.
Oh, interesting. That makes me happy.
Volume 7 is where Greg Capullo and Tony Daniel took over on art, with Todd McFarlane not doing any of the art.
Oh, okay.
So whereas this volume still had Todd McFarlane working on at least something in almost every issue, Volume 7 is, I think it's a rotating team. If I remember right, it's Greg Capullo on 39, 41, and 43, and Tony Daniel on 40, 42, and 44.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. But yeah, I know this is where Spawn gets batshit crazy, because we have, if I remember right, we have Cygor, the Curse, Santa Spawn, all kinds of shenanigans and craziness breaking up, and some wacky ass Spawn shit. But if I remember right, all very fun stuff. And again, you have a Tony Daniel who's becoming more and more Tony Daniel, mixing with the Greg Capullo, who's already getting into the Greg Capullo we love and know, mixed in with Todd McFarlane, who is focused on the story alone. And we've talked about a lot how Todd McFarlane, who is focused on the story first and art later, is always best Spawn when he's writing. Agreed, yeah. Volume 6, I think, by no means is it a blowout, an amazing volume, but I also think it is a...
It's a rough one, I feel like. It's of the ones we've encountered, I feel like it's the roughest, and it may be the roughest because I've come to expect such a level of quality, and coming off of Volume 5, I think, did not help it.
Yeah, I think 3, 4, and 5, because 3, we talked about, you have the Houdini issues, which are fucking shit, but...
Yeah.
Everything else
but
is
you
great.
Also
and you
had
have
those,
4.
The Grant Morrison issues.
Yes, you have the Grant Morrison issues, and you have the Hunt, and in 5 you have the kind of him almost a Superman walking through different towns kind of era of Spawn, like doing stuff, and then here
which
you have...
sucked for Superman, but it really worked for Spawn.
Which is bizarre. Yeah, no, you have some great moments, and I get very thrilled where it builds up to, and I think this issue definitely has a lull in it, this volume, but I don't think, I guess for me, I can't call it the worst, because it never consistent, whereas, like, again, issue 3 just ends on some rough issues, and I can't remember if the Houdini issues are together, if it goes 3 and 4, but I just remember having...
No, they are, because we talked about that, how wonderful the 3 issues of Grant Morrison's work are, and then you have the absolute garbage of the Houdini issues at the end of the volume, the last 2, but then that led into the Hunt, so, I mean, it really made the Houdini issues so terrible, because they were surrounded on both sides by some of the best Spawn we have seen to this point.
Where I think this one you have some very mid to good level Spawn starting out, and you have 37 that, again, admittedly, I think does take a hit, but then 38 is just dumb fun Spawn.
Yeah, which again I enjoyed. It was a nice bounce back. Yes. I'm really glad this volume didn't end on 37 because it would have ended on such a sour note.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, dumb fun is definitely a direction I can appreciate Spawn coming in.
If I remember correctly, we're about to jump into a lot of dumb fun. It's a lot of big weird shit, bombastic shit, and some fun stuff. And if I remember right, I think we have the issue that heavily makes fun of Marvel.
Interesting.
If I remember right, there's an issue coming up where it's... I'm going to peek ahead, but I want to say there is an issue of... I think... Is it one of Twitch's kids? It's something with a kid having like a comic book collection. Cause I think it's issue 42. Cause I think 42 is called Fanboy.
Oh shit!
And I think there's a lot of like I have a visual memory of a kid holding like an X-Force comic and like a Hulk poster and shit like that. Yeah, it's gonna get weird. It's gonna get fun. It's gonna get dumb. But either way, first I want to say thank you so much for everyone listening to this volume, to our last volume of Spawn. We love doing Respawn. It's such a blast to get to sit down and even a volume like this that isn't maybe as bombastic as 5. It's still a blast to read and talk about, especially in the current climate. In the current climate,
for sure,
where we have so much shit going on. It's nice to sit down and not have to worry about is next week gonna have a comic that I care about.
Yeah. It's kind of like the James Bond situation of even if it's bad, it's still enjoyable. I still have a good time.
Exactly.
I hope that that came across in this episode. Yeah. When again, I was not a huge fan of these issues, but I did have a good time reading them, and I really had a great time discussing them.
Yeah, Spawn. The entire reason we want to do this show is just because Spawn in itself is a very weird series, but it's always to me interesting and fun, even to this day. To date this a little bit, issue 307 just came out, and I was ecstatic to read it just because it's like the fact that we have a long-term storytelling comic that is still coming out and still building off of shit that happened during these issues is crazy, and it's definitely a comic that rewards people for the more they read, and it is a comic that we talk about all the time, doesn't get the credit for having those poignant moments of an image book universe filled with shit like Youngblood that has moments of funness, but never had. I've never read a Youngblood issue or a Bloodstrike issue or anything like where you have like, oh my god, how did it have this moment that really wrenched at my heart? Spawn surprisingly has we've talked about every volume so far has at least one or two moments like, man, god damn it, that hit me in the heart.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Even this one, we talked about the whole thing. Spawn walking out after Cyan asking, "Do my mama know you?" And him like, "I thought she did." You have again the last scene of, "Can you keep that evil man away from her?" And I'm trying.
Mm-hmm.
Great fucking moments mixed in with crazy other shit. It's something.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It feels like the last 3 pages of this volume is such a great microcosm of Spawn as a whole, and I really appreciate that.
I do too. I think it captures this volume captures kind of so many different things of the Spawn universe and lore that I get. I think that's why I forgive it a little bit more on stuff because it's still. For me personally, even bad, like you mentioned, James Bond, bad Spawn is still fun Spawn because it just the core ideas are again get so weird. Even the issue like the Freak, it's like, what other mainstream comic at that point was just gonna be like, hey, Alan Moore, you want to write an issue about a mental patient? And it's like, sure, why not?
Yeah,
that's our.
Just trying to capture what the kids were into at this moment, and I feel like I definitely feel like the previous more ventures into the Spawnverse were much stronger. I'm a big fan of issue 8. The Violator miniseries is again dumb but fun. And this issue just fails on all levels, but it definitely doesn't break the comic for me in any way, shape, or form.
I think for me it always goes back to I just appreciate that Todd McFarlane in the Spawn universe it was never afraid to take weird chances. Mm-hmm. And this is another volume that really dives into that of again going from Alan Moore Freak issue to Cybernetic Gorilla issue. Like I love Batman, and even at its craziest, outside of the very current like Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo metal era stuff, even that is like, well, I can't say that because Grant Morrison did Batman, but still, it's a very rare feature to go from two crazy things, and somehow it still tonally work in that universe.
Right. Exactly.
It is a difficult thing. Even when it doesn't pay off, I'm always blown away by, like, I love people taking chances, and that's just fucking bizarre enough. Even the Houdini issues we hate. The fact that they were still like, do you want to write about Houdini being in charge of a magic circle of ancients? It's like, that sounds like a good idea.
Cool concepts. There's some cool concepts in the Houdini issues that are executed so fucking poorly.
Talk about never paying off in the Spawn universe. I still, to this day, I wonder if Todd McFarlane was like, I fucking hate those issues, knowing how late they were released, how they were released, and the fact that, to my knowledge, that storyline, I can't remember it being picked up again. Maybe it is. I don't remember. I can't. But at least then that writer, like that, the storyline's picked at least not for a long time. Where everything else we're seeing stuff.
You want to hear something crazy? I'm doing a big deep dive X-Men reread because of course I am. I can't just be doing a deep reread on one particular comic series. Tom Wojciechowski inked some X-Men comics in the 1970s.
Really?
That dude's been in comics for ages. And he was like the letterer for Spawn or something. And we discussed that when those issues were actually on our plate to read. But yeah, I did not realize Wojciechowski has been in comics forever, and he wrote 2 issues of Spawn that are so bad.
Yeah, no, they are not. They are not great at all. I'm trying to. I'm having to look this up because I don't want to be wrong because I don't think Houdini pops up again, but he definitely could. I don't remember. Let's see. What's called Showtime? No, I think he only does 19 and 20. That's probably for the best.
Yeah,
The Houdini character proved... Oh, wow, I didn't know this. The Houdini character proved popular enough that Image allowed Orzadowski and Grossberg to spin him off into his own 4-issue miniseries called Daring Escapes. Wow. Really? That's bizarre.
That's bizarre as shit. But at least... I'm assuming Spawn wasn't involved in those Daring Escapes issues?
I don't think so, because I've never heard of them.
I feel like I have heard of that miniseries, but I didn't know it was actually tied to the Spawn continuity of Houdini.
That's weird. Man, that is bizarre. Wow. Here is Daring Escape. It doesn't look like it, but wow. Who guessed it? Oh, hey, I guess it was popular then.
Weird, yeah.
I guess he was, and like I said, the core idea is a good idea.
Yeah.
But it's just not done well at all.
The execution was atrocious.
Either way, though, thank you guys for listening. No matter what platform you are listening to this on, whether it be SoundCloud or iTunes or Spotify or YouTube. Or wherever we're at, please like, subscribe, leave a comment if you can. Let us know what you think. Let us know what your favorite issue of this series was. Again, I'm Colby. You can
tell me I'm wrong about the Freak issue. True. I'm curious.
If you guys love it, let us know. Because even though I didn't hate it, I definitely didn't love it. Again, I'm Colby. You can find me pretty on Twitter, on Instagram. I am at HellhoundF5.
And you can find us, you can shoot us an email at blahblahpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/blahblahpodcast. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at blahblahpod and at blahblahpodcast specifically. That is our home show, and that is the show we are going to be dropping next weekend.
Yes.
Are we going to talk about all the weird shit happening in wrestling and comics? Probably. Right. But then again, also, I have a strong no rumor mill, no tabloid style storytelling or discussion on blah blah. So how much we'll end up talking about the Tremors shaking wrestling in comics next week, who knows? Will we talk about comics we've been reading recently?
Yes.
Most likely. Yes. So please feel free to tune into that. If you're only listening to these for the respawns, that's also cool. But if you listen to our other show, you'll get to hear us swear even more about comics.
Very true, and there's a lot of weird stuff to swear about these days.
Absolutely. So thank you all so much for listening to this episode. If you're only listening to Respawns, we'll see you in a month with Origins Volume 7.
Yes, I can't wait. So long, everybody. Good night.